All right, 5C, we're going to look at area under the curve, which is the same as probability that we found in 5A, but this time we're going to add a wrinkle to it. So if we look at an example, the mean on a stats test was 84 and the standard deviation was 4. What's the probability that a randomly selected student scored lower than an 80? Okay, so this is a question just like what we did in 5A. All right, so I could draw my curve. The mean is 84, so that would go right here. And then the standard deviation is 4. So this next line, one standard deviation below, would be 80. And if I want students that scored lower than an 80, I would just add these percentages together. Okay, that is what we have already done. Now, the next step to this is this type of question. So what is the probability that a randomly selected student scored lower than a 77? So now my mean of 84 would go here. My one standard deviation down would be 80, and then two standard deviations down would be 76. So 77 would be in between 1 and 2 standard deviations, all right? And so we have no way of knowing or guessing. This number is 13.5%. How much of that 13.5% applies if I'm at 77 instead of 76? Okay, so we got to do things a little bit differently now. Okay, back in the old days when I went to school, this is how we had to do it. We had a little table and we had to find the z-score, and then we went and looked at our table for the z-scores. You may have seen this in Algebra 2. Okay, this is the old school method, but thankfully for us, technology has evolved and now we can use Desmos. Okay, so all of these questions can be done in the Desmos calculator. And so you have your directions over here. We're going to go to our keyboard and go to functions, and we're going to scroll down. The header that we're looking for is probability distributions, and then the one we want is the normal distribution. Okay, and then in these parentheses, and the nice part is if you ever forget, Desmos tells you, you need to type the mean, comma, the standard deviation. All right, and then once you do that, I'm going to put in these numbers from our examples. Once you do that, we click this little thing for cumulative probability, and then we can find all kinds of different probabilities. Okay, so let's go through some examples. All right, and so the first one is the question that we were looking at. What is the probability that a randomly selected student scored lower than a 77? Okay, lower than a 77 means I want to go to the left of 77. So I'm going to pick left and I'm going to type in 77. And Desmos tells me right there the probability of that happening is 0.04. Okay. What is the probability that a randomly selected student scored higher than an 85? Okay, so higher on our curve is to the right. And then I'm going to change this number to 85. And there's my answer, 0.401. All right. What is the probability that a randomly selected student scored between a 77 and a 92? Okay, so between two numbers, we want inner, right? I want to know between, and then I put in my two numbers, 77 and 92. And it tells me that the chances of getting between those two is 0.937. Right? And then the last kind of question that we need to know is just like we did with 5A. If 87 students took the stats test, how many scored below an 85, right? So this is how many, not what's the probability, okay? So below 85 means I need left. So I need to the left of 85. And the probability is 0.599, okay? So to get how many, I'm going to do 0.599 times the 87 students who took the test, all right? And so about 52 of them would have got below an 85 on this test. Okay. The only other thing I want to note for you guys is Desmos gives you probabilities. So if you were asked for a percent, you would need to move this decimal over 2 places. So like the probability is 0.599, the percent is 59.9%. Okay, so just make sure that you pay attention to what word the question is asking for you. Is it like these where it's asking what is the probability, or is it like some of the ones we did in 5A where it says like what percent of? Okay, and all you have to do is move the decimal. That's the only thing that changes. Okay, and that is it for 5C.